Hey everybody, welcome to Outlier on Air, episode 420. This is the podcast where we talk to the founders, disruptors, and mavens of the world. As always, I'm your host, Ever Gonzalez. Thank you for joining us. On today's episode, we have Marc Groman. Marc is the co-host of Their Own Devices podcast. Marc is also an internationally recognized expert in privacy, technology, and cybersecurity. His past roles include Senior Advisor for Privacy in the Obama White House, Chief Privacy Officer for the Federal Trade Commission, and President and CEO of the Network Advertising Initiative. His vision and innovative approaches to tackling privacy and tech issues during the Obama administration earned him the International Association of Privacy Professionals 2017 Leadership Award. Needless to say, Marc is an expert when it comes to cybersecurity. In this episode, we talk about our kids and social media. We talk about business owners and what they need to look out for when it comes to cybersecurity, and much, much more. I really hope you enjoy this episode. Marc is a real deal, and you're really going to like him. Before we get into this episode, I want to remind you to join us at outlierhq.com. That's outlierhq.com. There you can be able to find more interviews, a lot of the great people that we've had on the show. We've had 400 plus episodes and a ton of amazing people. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast, rate, review it, share with your friends. Also, I'd like to invite you over to outliercs.com. That's outliercs.com. Also, as many of you know, we also host the Outlier Podcast Festival throughout the country. And if you're thinking about starting a podcast, are a podcast lover, or just want to hang out with amazing people, join us at outliercs.com. That's outliercs.com. Anyway, without further ado, here's Marc. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on for a couple different reasons. You come highly recommended. You're a co-host of a podcast that I think is needed these days for parents and just anybody that's kind of looking into the cybersecurity space and technology. And so the next 25 minutes, 30 minutes or so, we just kind of want to pick your brain and have a great discussion about things that you obviously know very much about. So again, thank you for being on the show.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, so you're the co-host of Their Own Devices. Let's talk about the podcast. Why the podcast? Why now?
Well, we launched the podcast in November, so we published only 5 episodes to date. And it really came about from me having some time to shift some of my attention away from what is my office, which has been cybersecurity, surveillance, and privacy in the government sector in Silicon Valley, to more time at home and watching my own son, who is now just turned 13, starting to engage more and more with technology, the online world, digital content, of course, social media and video games, my son and his peers. And it made me start to think about surveillance, privacy, technology, and online safety in a new way, watching the kinds of things he was doing, but even more concerning the activities of some of his peers who had, these mobile computers in their hands and were engaging in a wide range of activities that I'm not sure they understood, and I know their parents didn't understand. And my co-host is a doctor in adolescent medicine at Georgetown University Medical Center. He approaches these same issues around children, teenagers, and technology from the lens of a doctor: mental health, anxiety, sleep deprivation, problematic media use, and addiction. And over a series of conversations, we realized that we're not having enough of a dialogue about this. And importantly, parents are not keeping up.
Yeah, that's the scary part, right? I mean, in the beginning, my whole focus was, don't let my kids watch porn, don't send nude pictures of yourself to anybody else. And I think most parents were like, if that's it, then we're okay. But like you mentioned, it goes much deeper than that. I mean, there's depression involved with this, right? Addiction. What can we do as parents?
So there's a whole range of issues. And let me first say that every child is different. And I want to just be upfront about that. And so, what will work for one family, or even within one family, what will work for one particular child, may not work for others. And so that's important to understand. And as you noted, there are a wide range of issues, ranging from my area, which is teaching children how to responsibly use technology, understand when it's appropriate to share data and when you shouldn't, understanding that delete doesn't mean delete online, and those range of issues, all the way to what my co-host talks about, which is the features of social media and the internet that really can get your children hooked, that the psychosocial impact, the impact on development and their ability to interact with others. So there's a wide range. What I think is the most important is that parents, and this is going to not sound great and helpful, but you just have to educate yourself. And by that I mean, before you toss an iPhone or any smartphone into your child's hands, and whatever age you choose for your own child, let's pick 13, know what you're giving them and then explain it to the kid so that they understand that there are sensors and there are cameras and microphones and the like. And then as they download different apps, whether it's Snapchat or Musical.ly or Fortnite, they understand the ramifications and how to use it, how to not share things by mistake, how to not engage with strangers. Because my message is that technology is awesome, man. I love tech. My whole house is wired. I have a Nest and an Echo. I've got more devices than you can imagine, as does my own son. But that means taking the time to educate him about whatever application he's going on, and understanding that what you do online can have consequences offline. And if there's behavior that I would punish you for offline, then don't do it online just because you're facing a screen.
With technology and social media, it's moving so quickly that I think most people are having a hard time keeping up. And it feels like our kids, once, in the teenage years, they know more than their parents for the most part. As somebody that, uses a cell phone, has a laptop, those type of things, but is not what you would consider really tech savvy. A lot of times our kids know more than us. So what can we do to kind of stay on top of it? Because it changes so much. I mean, classes, what does that look like?
So you're right. And that is one of the key challenges, which is this sort of rapid evolution of technology and the rapid pace at which even the social media platforms change. So a parent may approve a certain platform because it's limited to sharing photos. And within months, that same platform now allows for group chats and instant messaging and video texting and the like. And so we do need to stay on top of these things. And our children will always be one step ahead of us. I'm an expert on this, and I'm in a race with my own 13-year-old.
Really? That's interesting, right?
Well,
and scary.
For better or for worse, I value tech education. And so I sent him off to technology camp where he learned how to build his own laptop, which is great. But shortly thereafter, he came home and I discovered that the little guy had hacked all the parental controls that I installed on his devices. So, for a split second, I was moderately impressed. And then I was angry and we had to have a deep discussion. So there are a number of resources that are available. There are websites that have summaries of these features like Common Sense Media and FOSI.org, the Family Online Safety Institute. But there's no substitute for sitting down with your kid and saying, John, how do you engage online? Like, what are these apps? And show me them. No kid is going to want to have you friend you or link to you on Snapchat or their social media, but check it out. See what's going on. How can they use it and understand it? Knowing full well that it's practically a teenager's job to try and hide things from us as parents. But that said, we should understand generally what they're doing. And also, start the conversation young. Don't wait till they're 15 or 16. It's maybe too late. By 11, before the first smartphone, is the time to start talking about sort of like core values and how to talk to people offline and online. What to do if you see cyberbullying, which is a huge issue now for kids. Making sure that they understand how to navigate that online world. And another aspect of it is trying to model good behavior. And I'm not going to be, dishonest here. Like, I'm not the best at that. But if we want our children to only spend a certain amount of time on their devices and to use things thoughtfully, responsibly, and get out and exercise, then we better do it too. Because if we sit at the dining room table texting, it's hard to teach our children that that's not the best place for screens.
You know what has scared me, and we talked a little bit about it. We're seeing these reports, and it feels like there are more and more coming out as we continue to progress through this social media online world. The amount of, and this is for adults as well, not just children, the amount of anxiety, depression, the what is a fear of missing out.
Right.
We're losing sleep, right? We're basically giving away our private information. We're oversharing all the time. That's difficult as a parent. I'm with you. I think I struggle a little bit there as well. But with our children, I mean, it's suicide is on the rise, right? Depression is on the rise. Anxiety is on the rise with our teenagers. That is what scares me, stops me dead on my track. And I'm trying to figure this out as a parent, as a human, right? What is this going to look like in 5-10 years?
Well, that's really difficult to know because the rapid pace of innovation and technology and development, and we're starting to see some better signs. And so in one of our episodes, we sat down with an engineer from Google who talked to us about many of the bad practices today, because many platforms, applications, they actually and intentionally implement features that are designed to get our kids hooked.
Sure.
There's no accident here when the UI, the user experience, default settings are done the way they are. It's to keep the kids engaged, to keep their eyeballs facing the screen so that they can gather more data, generate more ad revenue. But we are seeing changes in technology. We're seeing companies beginning to own up to this and implement new features to help people understand how they're using technology. We've seen that with the new updates to the iOS 12 operating system that has screen time. So the dialogue is happening, and parents are starting to let companies know what they think, and they're starting to take some more responsibility. But again, it comes down to knowing your own kid and being an engaged parent, because every kid will respond differently. Some things I think are uniform. I'm not the doctor on the show, but we talk about, for example, sleep and sleep deprivation. Every doctor I've ever chatted with has said, get the devices out of your kids' hands a half an hour to an hour before bedtime. Your children need to decompress, disconnect from the screen, stop looking at the blue light, and relax their minds before bedtime. And letting your kids game up until the moment of bedtime means they're going to have a more difficult time falling asleep. There are things like that which are really significant.
One of the things that really got me interested in this is when I started to see all these, founders of these tech companies and their employees start to get rid of their smartphones and starting, a lot of them are starting to use flip phones, and they talk about how they don't let their own kids on these social media platforms and these online, different sites that they built themselves. They don't let their own kids on there. So, that's when the red flags truly started to come out.
There have been some pretty interesting stories about various executives from Silicon Valley companies who have either made statements to the effect of they limit their own children's technology, and used to some expressing even regret for some of the products and services that they helped build and create, because they did not fully appreciate the potential impact these technologies might have on a generation of children.
We talked about this moving too rapidly to really know what 5-10 years are going to look like. But some of the stuff that's coming out now with the facial recognition out in China and the things that they're doing as a country, as a state, scary, right? Some of this stuff is happening here. I've seen companies. I don't remember where it was. They have their own employees have chips implanted in them to kind of, what is it, clock in, clock out, right? To
right.
be able to buy.
Yeah, so there are experiments like that in some countries where employees consented to do that. There are other studies or places, for example, in Japan, where employees of large companies might wear a Fitbit and have their health status tracked because the corporation provides the health insurance. But certainly the most alarming and, I'll say, horrifying example of the true abuse of technology is China. And the way that China has really created a massive, all-encompassing surveillance state in parts of the country where every movement, every communication, every dollar spent is literally tracked. There are surveillance cameras everywhere. All conduct on your devices are tracked. There's literally, they don't use credit cards or cash in parts of China. It's all digital. So every dollar spent. And that is being collected and analyzed by the state. And they are using algorithms to score their own citizens and determine essentially a social score, or translation, loyalty to the government and Communist Party. And so if your social score suggests that you are loyal to the government, you might earn different benefits or privileges. And if they determine that you have a low social score, you might be restricted. This is what I had thought would be a science fiction nightmare scenario.
Well, it's like a bad episode of Black Mirror, right? That this
Right.
is already happening.
It is absolutely happening in China, in some other countries already. The potential exists, and that's really concerning. So we're going to have to, here in the U.S., closely monitor, examine the evolution of new technology. And again, I love tech. I love innovation, but there's a responsible way to innovate, and then there's an irresponsible way where we can no longer ignore the potential negative consequences of what we do, because as technology advances, as we collect more data, just as the potential benefits are increasing exponentially, so are the potential harms.
Well, this might be an unfair question, maybe, but like when we introduced you, talked about your background a little bit. Senior advisor for privacy at the Obama White House, right? So you've been in the thick of this, right? You are with the people that should be concerned about this and are the ones that are kind of helping put policy together for all of this. You're there. Are we going to have a China in our hands in the next little while?
Well,
does Congress understand what's happening?
So let me just back up and say I was there, but I'm no longer there. So obviously, I left the White House in January of 2017 with President Obama. I was a political appointee who worked for the president, but I was there for 2 years and worked on a really wide range of very complicated issues. Everything from autonomous vehicles, artificial intelligence, large deployment of aerial drones for different purposes, as well as the precision medicine initiative. And all of these data-driven initiatives, offer great benefits and potential benefits, but we have to be cognizant of what data we collect, and more importantly, once it's collected, what happens to it? What other uses can it be put to? How can it be combined with other data? And while I was in the White House, there were some significant successes on privacy that I'm proud of. New programs put in place to protect privacy and civil liberties, new people appointed. In other cases, things moved forward that concerned me. Some things, in all cases could have been done with some more sensitivities to privacy. As for now, certainly privacy is high in our public discourse today, and Congress is currently evaluating a range of proposals for even a new federal privacy law. I don't know if you know, but we don't even have a federal privacy law in the U.S. Most, if not all, other sort of developed nations do. Europe has a fairly new one passed earlier this year, but we do not.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that there are enormous gaps. So in our country, we have what's called a sectoral approach. So we have laws that say apply to healthcare data called HIPAA. And it's a good law that applies strictly to data collected about our health in a hospital. But if a Silicon Valley company, if Facebook or Google or Instagram collect similar kinds of data about health based on how we use applications, how we travel across the internet. There is no law that governs that today.
Oh, interesting.
It's a huge gap. And so that's why there have been numerous hearings in the Capitol and widespread discussions on, is it time for the United States to have a privacy law? I would answer that yes. I think the time was 10 years ago, but here we are today. Whether or not our elected officials have the capacity to understand the full scope of issues and get this right, I'm skeptical, but I am working on it, and I will provide any assistance I can, and if asked, I will be there to help the effort.
I mean, are you feeling optimistic? Is this kind of when it comes to privacy and the things that we're talking about, a doomsday scenario? I mean, your own personal feelings of where we are and where you think we're going to go.
It's not a doomsday scenario. I think that we are certainly, the issues are now top of mind for many companies. They weren't before, in part to the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal, which really illustrated potential harm from data. It's not just about identity theft or embarrassment, but the wide-scale abuse and exploitation of data for really serious negative reasons has opened a lot of people's eyes. And so there's more scrutiny today. And that's a positive. We also have a new law in Europe called the General Data Protection Regulation and a new privacy law in California that will come into effect in about a year. That said, while those are all really positive steps and should be applauded, the pace of change, the deployment of new technologies, new sensors, new ways to collect different kinds of data are moving so quickly that I don't know that our policy will be able to adequately keep up.
Which is scary, and that's what concerns me. Not only as a citizen, but as a business owner as well. Let's shift focus just a tiny bit to businesses, right? What's the top cybersecurity concern most businesses are facing, right? Our audience, large portion of our audience are entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs, and this is top of mind right now, or maybe should be top of mind. But what are some of the top concerns that we're facing now? What can we do about them?
That's a great question. And currently, I'm a consultant, and I advise a lot of tech startups, and I serve on numerous advisory boards for a wide range of technology startups, ranging from really first few months to, Series A, Series B, VC funding. And the issues around data security and privacy are increasingly significant and important to the success of almost any business, whether you're a data intensive business where your real focus is on data and monetizing data, to whether that's sort of a side part or an enabler of a business. Every company, and unfortunately this includes small business, has to be aware of cybersecurity, data security, and you have to implement controls to secure that data. We used to think about a small business being exempt from any requirements. Maybe it's a mom and pop shop on Main Street with 10 employees and you sell certain goods or services to your community. You would never want that kind of business to be subjected to the same kind of regulations as, Ford Motor. But today what we're seeing is that small companies, maybe it's 2 people working out of your apartment, can launch a business that collects data on millions of people. Mm-hmm. And those 2 individuals might think of themselves as a small business outside the radar of the Attorney General, in fact, have serious responsibilities because of the volume of data they collect and maybe the sensitivity. And so even small business people and innovators and entrepreneurs have to have this on their radar and ensure that as you collect different kinds of information, you process it, share it, store it, it's being done in a way that is secure. Because the last thing you want as a small startup is to sort of start out in the first few years as the headline for a data breach, particularly for sensitive data.
But even when there are data breaches, and we see them from time to time, what are the consequences? I mean, I don't see these companies, especially some of the larger ones, it doesn't seem to affect them as much, right? I mean, Facebook is still functioning as Facebook. Some of these other financial institutions that we see, it feels like it's just a headline, and then it goes away pretty quickly. And
Yeah.
as
So
consumers, we're still using them. We're still kind of seeking them out.
right. Well, you teed up a number of issues there. So the first one about what are the consequences for a company is also being discussed right now in Washington, D.C., because in the U.S., we don't have a federal data breach law. When I worked in Congress also before the White House, and I worked on several bills and legislative proposals to draft or enact a federal data breach and data security law that would give the Federal Trade Commission more teeth, the ability to impose civil penalties for companies that had really serious violations and hold companies to their promises to secure data. But we just don't have that law. That said, there are still pretty significant consequences. The cost to respond to a breach now can be in the tens of millions when you consider everything from your internal forensics costs to lawyers to giving notice to individuals, remediation and the like. And there's reputational harm as well. So I'm not dismissive of the consequences, but I do think that we should have a more robust federal law, and there should be the ability to get civil penalties when the conduct is really egregious. I'm not talking about a mistake, but when a company collects sensitive data and is irresponsible with that data, they ought to be fined.
Which makes sense, right? Which hopefully we get something out pretty soon. And it sounds like you're still, I mean, I know you're not there day to day in the White House and at that role, but it's still, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you're still in the thick of things. I mean, you're still in there trying to change things and improve it for the rest of us.
Yeah, right now I'm consulting, so I've got a number of clients that are actively engaged in these debates. I actually teach at Georgetown Law School here in DC. Nice. I teach a course on data breach and data breach response. And then, of course, now I'm doing the podcast because that allows me to incorporate all of my professional experience over the years, working with every entity of the government, from the NSA and CIA to the Pentagon, with my parenting and with like this new issue that's like right front and center in my own home, which is how is all of this technology, not just impacting the government or society, but my own 13-year-old, and trying to talk to other parents, parent to parent, and say, before you give your kid that iPhone 10 and your kid's 12, understand the incredible capabilities of the device and what you're giving them. Because that's going to be more and more important in the future. We're going to have to understand and act responsibly as adults and as kids.
I love one of the lines on your website that says, MTV parents raising YouTube kids, right? And
Absolutely.
when we were kids, our parents in that generation were like a lost generation. We were the lost generation, right? With everything going on in the world. And I think we still kind of, as a society, a little bit think the same thing about our kids and the all the negativeness that's out there, all of the bad stuff that seems to be happening in their world. I think it's just a generational thing, right? Parents always feel this way, but and maybe this is just my own personal bias, but they have so much pressure, all this tech on top of them, right? Just they're smarter than we were, I think, at that age as teenagers. But you're still optimistic that we can, as a society, overcome some of these negative things that are out there
Right.
with the tech and the social media.
I do think every generation looks at the kids and the upcoming generation and, wrings their hands and says, oh my God, the future's over. Look at our kids. And, I broke a few rules myself in high school. I mean, let's face it, I didn't have the best judgment age 16 and may have done one or two really stupid things myself. That said, some things have changed with the technology.
But when you did the one or two stupid things at 16, nobody knows about it now, right? Where if you're
so that's how the technology changed, and it's teaching our children how to responsibly engage. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've been involved or spoke with parents where their kids in high school did something, let's just say, questionable in judgment. Whether it was, being caught drinking or they went on the roof of a school, whatever, went somewhere they shouldn't be. So it's trespassing, which kids, you shouldn't do it, but I can see kids wanting to go climb something.
Mm-hmm.
But then they photograph themselves, take a selfie, and post it online.
Uh-huh.
And then the police show up at their homes 24 hours later. And they're stunned. And the kids are like, how'd the police know? Well, genius. Yeah. Not only did you break somewhere, you have a selfie next to a sign that says no trespassing, federal offense, keep out. And you posted it, right? And so there you are, no defense. The police have the photograph. You're going to get locked up. So it's teaching our kids how to engage with this new technology to avoid that and to understand the consequences of online behavior, what you post, what you say, and how you interact.
Marc, when we have you back on the show in 3 years, what are we going to be talking about in general? And then what is life going to look like at home for you with your what? He's still going to be a teenager, right? How old is
he? Yeah, he will. Yeah, so he'll be 16 or 17.
So what is that going to look like?
So I would say our homes are going to have way more devices and sensors. And so you would expect almost every room to have microphones, cameras, video sensors, thermometers, and the like. And we will be talking to our microwave, our printer, and the refrigerator will be talking to the oven. And in the cloud, all of this data is going to be collected from our homes, our bedrooms, our bathrooms, analyzed, processed, stored. And that's going to tee up a host of privacy and other issues around even government use of that kind of data. And the same will be true of your automobile. Your automobile is going to have sensors everywhere, and there'll be tons of data collected. And so that's just one of the things I think we'll see in the future is this growth of the Internet of Things and connected devices and sensors. And what goes along with that is this increase in what I call passive data collection. So it's not that I'm actively engaging online with a website and so they're collecting data. It's going to be the fact that in a smart home or even a smart city where everything has sensors, data will be collected everywhere you go. And we're going to have to figure out as a country and as a society and democracy, what does that mean when so much data can be collected 24/7? Who gets it? How do they get to use it? And how long? Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny. So I have friends that are very excited about that think life is going to be better, easier, right? We're moving forward. Then I have others that are completely terrified of what you just described. And so can we resist? I mean, do we accept it? It's going to happen, I think, no matter what. What can we do about it? What should we do about it?
So what we need to do about it is actively engage as policymakers and also actively engage as parents and not leave it up to the policymakers who may be distracted with other garbage here in DC. But to make sure that as we take on new technology, I'll tell you, here's an example. And I may be the only dad in the world who's ever done this. And if you ask my son, he'll tell you that. But when he wanted apps like Instagram or Snapchat, Musical.ly, I said, that's great. You're 13. I think it's appropriate. But before you do that, go read the privacy policy, learn how the privacy settings work, come back, show me, and then you can have the app. And he looked at me like I was insane because no other dad said that, but that's what we need to do. If you're going to give your kid an app that allows them to chat with strangers and upload photos and share videos and post things that will be on the internet forever, I think it warrants forcing them to understand how these tools really work and what their capabilities are. We're going to have to do that. And it sounds silly, but there's going to be a time when you're going to have to teach your kids, like, when you talk to the microwave, here's how you do it, and here's what not to say.
Well, Marc, we're fans of the work that you're doing, the stuff that you've done in the past, what you're doing now with the podcast, their own devices. We're excited about the possibility of this changing rapidly and you being at the forefront and kind of being able to hear it from your own words on your show. For those that are interested and want to get to know you better, follow you at the podcast, websites, where can we find you online?
Yeah, so LinkedIn. I don't have a website for my consulting business because I haven't yet decided how long that's going to keep going. But
Nice.
I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter. And of course, if you just Google their own devices podcast, it will come up, and I think people will really enjoy it. It's sort of light, serious topics with a light approach. The topics vary, and we have guests that vary from, we've had teenagers on, experts, engineers, parents, looking at these issues from different perspectives, trying to talk parent to parent, not lecture people, but chat with people.
Which is the way to do it. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. And Outliers, you can go to outlierhq.com. That's outlierhq.com. First of all, subscribe to the podcast, rate, review it, share it with your friends. But there you're going to find links to Marc's podcast, website, social media, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. Reach out to him. He's the real deal. He's talking about things that are very important, but obviously has a good sense of humor about it as well. Marc, we really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for your words of wisdom. And we're going to continue to follow you.
All right. I thank you, and I really appreciate it.
Outliers, we'll talk to you tomorrow.